You don't need a social funnel, a $3,000 camera, or to go viral in order to make money online. You see, most online coaches are diverting your attention from the one thing that can actually help you level up in 2025 and start making and generating the money that you want to make for your business. You may think to yourself, how the hell is he going to say this to me? Who is this guy? Well, look, I've generated $500,000 in revenue for my business from the comfort of my home, all online, while working a full-time job, raising a young family, and even going to school for a season at a time for an MBA in marketing. I didn't have a social funnel or go viral or spend $3,000 on a camera before I was able to generate revenue for my business. I made my first dollar online back at around 2007 when I started producing my own music and self-distributing it. I noticed the power of two things. Number one is creating a good enough product, and number two is being able to market it or let people know that it even exists. Back then, I was making pennies. It wasn't anything to sustainably take care of me or my growing needs. But I was a young high school student at the time, so it didn't matter. I was making a little bit of money doing something that I loved. It wasn't until 2009 that I had built up additional skills, graphic design, videography, and of course, audio production, where I could sell those services at a higher ticket price. Now, high ticket at that time for me meant that I can make more money doing what I loved versus having to work a 9-to-5 minimum wage job. I ended up going to college and selling my services there, making a couple $100 here and there. Fast forward to 2017, and with my presence online and of course my ability to communicate the fact that I was good at audio engineering, pretty decent at digital marketing, graphic design, video production, I landed a client without even marketing it. You see, a friend of mine had been following my journey and wanted to start a podcast. He reached out to me asking if I would produce the podcast for him, since he honestly didn't have a lot of time, but had some spare budget to be able to hire someone. Rather than going overseas or posting a job board, he decided to reach out to me because he knew me, he liked me, and he trusted me. Not only that, but he saw the level of quality of work throughout the years that I was able to produce and knew that I would do a great job for his podcast. From 2017 to 2023, I produced his podcast, going from 0 listeners at the time to over 10,000 monthly listeners consistently on an audio-only podcast in a very, very, very hyper niche industry. This was relatively unheard of, and so he was able to attract sponsors, speaking engagements, and other business opportunities. But throughout that time period, I stayed back. I didn't promote myself. I didn't run any social funnel campaigns, which probably, honestly, could have done me well. I didn't go viral, and I certainly didn't spend $3,000 on a camera just to make additional money. No, I spent the money on things that mattered to me at the time, my family, experiences, etc., and I lived a relatively quiet life. Now, it was in 2019 where I had a breaking point. My full-time job being an insurance claims adjuster was just killing me. I mean, I would clock into work and just feel the anxiety and the stress of having to answer calls, having to deal with people at their absolute worst. Now, don't get me wrong. I felt bad for someone who had just gone through a car accident, needed a ton of help, and was in financial and emotional distress. But when you're dealing with hundreds and hundreds of volumes across the country, with phone calls coming in every 2 to 3 seconds between each call, it got emotionally exhausting and it fatigued my high levels of empathy. At that time, I became very callous, and honestly, I just wanted to get the hell away from that job. But again, instead of promoting my services online, running any sort of social funnels, going viral, or spending $3,000 on a camera, I just decided to start my own podcast. I knew that I had had some success with my client generating his podcast, and I figured, hey, why not? Let me do something that's actually going to free my mind from the drudgery of the 9-to-5. And so I launched my first podcast, and within a month, I landed an $18,000 sponsorship deal for 12 months. It was insane. You see, back when I started producing my friend's podcast, I was producing between 4 to 5 episodes a month, regularly editing it, producing it, and distributing it only for a few $100s a month. Now, I say only, and I'm very grateful for it, but compared to $18,000 in a span of 12 months for roughly around 10 episodes, yeah, that math wasn't mathing. I saw the opportunity there and I'm like, oh my gosh, I can make a lot more money here. And it was higher leverage. Now, of course, all good things come to an end. And I ran the show for about 2.5 years. All the while, I started getting better and better at producing high quality results driven podcasts. Friends and family members, acquaintances online started to see that. They began reaching out to me because of the level of work that I was producing. So between 2021 and roughly around 2023, I started to grow a podcast production agency focused on real business results. I worked with a handful of clients, and my agency went from generating somewhere between $20,000 a year to topping off at about $160,000 in 2023. I was fortunate enough because my career was also blossoming at the time. I had built enough systems in place where I had this agency part-time and I was able to still work my 9 to 5. There was a period of time where I was even going to school, getting a MBA in marketing and raising a young family. My wife and I had gotten married in 2016, welcomed our first child, our son, in 2017, and had pandemic babies. A set of twins that completely surprised us and honestly slightly threw us off track. But nonetheless, it felt like an incredible blessing. There was a lot of personal pressure that I dealt with at that time, trying to see how I could both build a business and scale my income with my 9 to 5. So building systems was crucial. Again, I wasn't focusing on marketing my services or building a huge following. I was just focusing on that one thing that led to incredible results in 2024 for my business. In October of 2023, I landed a whale client, a $200,000 client via LinkedIn that wanted me to come produce his podcast. So I had to quit my job. I had to go all in on my business. It was either all or nothing. It was clear cut. There was really nothing preventing me from going all in on my business at this time. So I decided to go all in. November, December, and January, we kind of laid the groundwork for his business. And then come February, we decided to launch his Video First podcast. In just 6 months, we landed 130,000 subscribers. It grew exponentially from just a dead channel that only had 800 subscribers and had barely posted in the last few years. We generated over 1,800 pieces of content for his channel, for his social media accounts, funneling a ton of traffic over to his email newsletter, to his paid course and community. I mean, it was wild. I'd never done something like that before. The content machine that we had built was fully functioning and was a lead generation magnet and engine for his business that he had just started from scratch. Nobody really knew him, and there hadn't been enough time to allow people to like and trust him, but we were still able to generate business for his new business. I decided to walk away from that partnership in September of this year and started working with clients one-on-one. Now, this was the first time I was having to deal with direct sales, direct response marketing, etc. I'd never really had to do it before, and it was because of this one thing: mastery. You see, what a lot of people don't tell you online is you have to master one thing first before you can actually start generating sustainable income for the long term. Now, there are a few grifters and online gurus that focus on direct response marketing, trying to sell you dreams and aspirations, hopes and ideas, ideals and dreams of this vision that is a life to be if you were to buy their $10,000 program. We've all seen it. Some of us maybe even have bought into it. It's a tale as old as time. The snake oil salesman, selling you nothing but hopes and dreams with absolutely nothing to show for it. So I went back thinking, what was it that actually led people to buy from me, my services, my agency, doubling my revenue every single year? It wasn't a social funnel. It wasn't going viral online. And it certainly wasn't buying a $3,000 camera. It was mastery in one thing. For me, it was results-based podcast production. Now, the challenge has been trying to effectively communicate that without coming across as salesy or desperate. I had a sales call with a potential prospect yesterday that I had met through LinkedIn. She mentioned, Nico, I've been on sales calls with a ton of coaches and consultants. And I can tell from your energy, you're not working from a place of scarcity. You're working from abundance. Now, let me be clear. My business revenue this year has fluctuated from topping at $52,000 in 1 month to going all the way down to $9,000. We're sitting at around 50% margin, and so the fluctuation obviously can hurt a lot because for me, I have a young family and I'm a sole provider. It's not that I don't have needs, but the abundance comes in my confidence of mastery. When I get on sales calls with a lot of coaches and consultants, it feels like they're trying to sell me on something that isn't something that they've necessarily mastered. And when I walk into their program, I realize, wow, this is largely underwhelming. They've mastered one thing really, really well, which is creating content. That's all great, but it falls flat. You've mastered the distribution component, but you haven't mastered the product. So this is why I've been focusing on the next generation of consultants and agency owners, those who have been so busy doing the doing and mastering the craft that they haven't necessarily spent their time or attention on the distribution component. I've built the distribution component. I've actually kind of mastered that. The direct sales component, yeah, I'm working on it. However, I know for a fact with polished, well-produced, video-first podcast and an ecosystem that can lend itself to getting people over from a podcast to a newsletter, from your LinkedIn to your newsletter, from your Instagram to your podcast to your newsletter, you can actually start to generate sales. And look, over the last 3 months, I've actually been able to generate an additional $25,000 in new revenue for my business. All after parting ways with a business partner, shifting my business completely from building his own info product business to just relaunching my agency and working on my core consulting offer. So if you're interested to see how our content system works and you've mastered a specific skill that you actually want to start communicating online so that you can become a top paid consultant, so that you can do what I did, which is become a top paid consultant, part-time, or even full-time, head over to the link in the description below. Watch the video to see how our content system works. And if you think it'll work for you, go ahead and apply to work with us. I'll see you next time.